everyone, and welcome back to my channel. So in today's video I'm going to be carrying on, coming to the close now of a review for Girls and Autism, Educational, Family and Personal Perspectives, edited by Barry Carpenter, Francesca Happe and Joe Egerton. So carrying on from last week's video, where I last left off, we now get to the chapter on employment and transitions. And this chapter is partly written or contributed to by a young woman called Helen Ellis, who's autistic. Helen Ellis was diagnosed autistic age 21, which is actually the same age I got diagnosed as being autistic. I also was 21 years old when I got diagnosed, and Helen Ellis got diagnosed after struggling at university. And again, that's like me. I got diagnosed just after I'd finished my 3-year university studies, because I studied history at my local university. And while I was at university, that was when things came to a head in terms of my parents kind of struggling to deal with my issues, which were becoming increasingly apparent, and I could no longer be in denial about my issues, because up till that point I'd been heavily in denial about them. I was resolute that there was nothing a problem, there's no problem. But everything came to a head when I was at university, mainly because my OCD was kind of like increasing. Obviously the OCD is separate to my autism, but they kind of interlink, and that kind of added to the stress. And it was just becoming more apparent to my parents that this couldn't go on, as it were, and that I needed to get help, and I needed to find out, once and for all what the issue was. And my parents suspected that I was autistic, and when I finally kind of also came to that conclusion that I might be autistic, after I'd looked into it, my parents were like, yes, that's what we've been trying to tell you all along. Because I actually remember I went into my mum's bedroom. I went into her bedroom and I said, I think I might be autistic. I've been reading about it. She was like, yes, that's what we've been thinking for a very long time. And my parents were like, yeah, we'll support you to try and get assessed for this thing. So that was a similar experience to Helen as well. She was diagnosed same age as me, which is quite interesting, after struggling at university. I didn't really struggle so much at university myself, because I was staying at home, so I wasn't in halls. Helen went away to university. So she obviously would have faced different struggles to me in that regard, because I stayed at home. I went to my local university because I couldn't manage halls, I just know when living hell, sharing accommodation with others just does not go down well at all with OCD. And I just couldn't contemplate it as a concept, because I'm very kind of routine based anyway, and felt safer staying at home. But that obviously minimised some of the stresses and some of the struggles I experienced, because it was all very familiar to me. I was within walking distance of a university, like 10 minutes walking distance, 10 to 15 minutes. So it was really home from home, and I could come home between lectures to kind of de-stress. It wasn't really that different to being in sixth form. The only difference was the change of environment, but I got used to the environment before I started university, because we had a tour of a university and it was all really familiar to me. And it was a nice small university. I think obviously if I'd gone away, I would have experienced more struggles. My mum did all the organising for me while I was at university, so she organised all my files for me to make sure that they were, all the files I came back with full of paper, because I'm quite a disorganised person and I'm not great at organising things. My mum put these files in order for me and labelled them and everything, which really helped. But I did all of the work. By that point, I'd learned how to write essays. It took me a really long time. As I talked about in another video, my parents did help me loads when I was at secondary school, did loads of work with me for my homework and really helped me so much in terms of like learning how to write essays and things like that. By the time I got to university, I finally had kind of figured it out. So I was like independent on the essay writing regard, and my parents didn't help me at all with any of the kind of like actual academic side. They just helped me with the organisation. And obviously I was catered for in terms of food. My parents did all the cooking, all the shopping, so I could then completely monofocus on my work. Like I would spend literally all day just studying and doing nothing else because I can't multitask. I can do one thing really well, but I can't do lots of things and do them well. I couldn't do that now because now my life is quite different and I do have more responsibilities, like I have to do my own cooking and stuff like that, and I'm just in a different setup now where it just would be way too much. But back then I was looked after 100%, so I could just 100% monofocus. But nevertheless, my OCDs were getting a lot worse at that point, and I was hardly going out because of my OCD. After going to university, I was really intensively focusing on my work and stuff, but I was having increasing amount of like meltdowns, what we call tantrums at the time, but in autism speak are called meltdowns, I guess, and screaming and stuff like that. And I was still really obsessed with Kate Winslet at that time, and things were just, I guess I was getting increasingly rigid and controlling, and that's part of the week. That's that. But go and check out my diagnosis video because I do talk about it then in that video as well. But yeah, it's just interesting that things came to a head for Helen as well at university, but unlike me, she went away from home. So she talks about, in her chapter, she talks specifically about the secondary school experience and about transitions at secondary school. And she says how she often got her homework tasks wrong as she was trying to process instructions at the same time as she was dealing with packing her bag up and getting to her next lesson. So yeah, I can really relate to that. That was one of the most stressful experiences at secondary school, was writing down homework while you had to like leave quickly for the next lesson. When I was, because of this, and the teachers were aware I had this problem, the teachers wrote up the homework for me, so I had to wait behind for the teachers to write my homework up for me because I really struggled to write it and get organised and leave the lesson at the same time. But that in itself led to stress because I had to wait for the teacher to write my homework up for me, to write the tasks down in my planner, because that was kind of like highlighted as an issue I had, so teachers were going to help me with that. That was a problem because by having to wait like that, it meant that I had less time to get to the next lesson, so that added to stress as well. So I don't know what would have been worse, me being left to do it on my own, which meant that I wouldn't have been able to get it down properly, or having to wait. I mean, at least the teachers wrote it down for me, and I carried on doing that pretty much through all of my time until sixth form. I did that. But it did mean that I remember getting quite stressed because I wasn't sure if I was going to get to the next lesson on time, and I found that a really stressful experience. Generally the transitions from lesson to lesson, particularly when I started secondary school and it was all new to me, to an extent you get used to it as you go through secondary school, but at least at first I found that really stressful, because then of course you have the massive crush of people in the corridors, and that's really stressful. And like particularly when I started, I got lost quite a lot of times because I found it really hard finding my way around the school. And I was supposed to get support with that, but they didn't really help me with that properly at all. I got help with my organisation when I had to go to the learning support unit, but that was about as far as it went on that regard. So yeah, it was really stressful. I got lost on a number of occasions, and that just adds to the stress of being at school. So I can relate to that, the exit crush and the overload. Obviously I didn't know about autism back then, so I didn't know it was overload I was experiencing, but you know, it's just very, very stressful. So another difference that Helen highlights, and this is different to my experience, this one, is that she went to a middle school which eased her transition a bit to high school, because when she moved to her new school in year 5, the teachers in the building were familiar, even though she had to move between lessons. So she had a kind of like a 3-stage kind of system, whereas I just went to a primary school and then a secondary school. I didn't go to a middle school. Helen went to high school age 13, I went to high school age 11. And she was saying how good the middle school system is for people with autism, because it helps them with that transition, because they can get used to like how things are going to be at secondary school while they're still within the familiar environment of primary school. That middle school is just like a kind of little step up. It just helps them kind of adjust to the change. And I think maybe I would have benefited from that. I do think that for many kids, age 11 can be too young to transition to secondary school. When I was that age, I was still, I think I mentioned this in my previous video, but year 6, the last year of primary school, was actually the best year of my life. I really enjoyed school. I loved that year because I had such an amazing teacher. She was almost like Miss Honey from Matilda. She was so nice. And and I just remember, and I got really into skipping in that age. I finally learned how to skip. And I remember really enjoying skipping games. And I didn't have any, and it was also the final year when I finally did make a friend. Although we broke up, it was just amazing. I finally had made a friend, nevertheless, despite the fact it was a rocky relationship. But that was really, I loved that, just the fact that I had finally made a friend. And just kind of like, I love skipping games and all of that. And I was still, and I was behind my years emotionally, I was quite immature. And I think, I was developing maybe a bit slower than my peers on a kind of an emotional, physical level, because I've always been rather immature and behind. I mean, you know what I mean? So it's kind of, I think maybe autism can do that for some people, is it can make you a little bit slower in your development. You do get there in the end, but it can make you, there's like a little developmental lag. So I think that I would have benefited from like being at primary school for a bit longer, because when you're at secondary school, they expect you to grow up like really, really fast, and that can just be too soon for many kids. And I also just think it's wrong that children have to lose their innocence at such a young age. So that's a topic for another video. Okay, so I'm going to be moving on to video number 2 now to carry on this with you. So moving on to video number 2.